It was a rainy Thursday afternoon in Denver, Colorado when my life took an unexpected turn. My name is Emily Carter, and until that day, I thought I understood my neighbors and friends completely. But sometimes, a single moment can shatter illusions and reveal truths you never imagined. The weapon in this story isn't what you might be thinking. It wasn't dangerous in the usual sense. It was a wooden fencing sword, the kind used by high school students for practice. But the way it entered my life, and the way one young man insisted on pushing it deeper into our friendship and trust, changed me forever. I was a school counselor, working at a local high school in Denver. My job was simple: listen, guide, and support students who were struggling. That day, a student named Jason Miller walked into my office. Jason was 16, tall for his age, with a restless energy that made him both fascinating and concerning. He carried a fencing practice sword with him, tapping it nervously against the floor. "Emily," he said, without waiting for permission to sit down, "I need to talk." I nodded, setting aside my paperwork. Jason wasn't the type to open up easily, so when he did, I knew it was serious. He explained that his father, a former soldier, had been pushing him into intense fencing practice. Jason didn't hate the sport, but he hated the pressure. His father kept telling him that life was a battlefield and that if he didn't master the sword, he'd never survive in the real world. Jason's words spilled out faster and faster, until he suddenly raised the practice sword and pressed it against the wooden desk in front of me. "I told him to stop," Jason whispered, his voice trembling. But he kept pushing the weapon deeper. He kept saying, "You're not strong enough, Jason. Push harder. Fight harder." I didn't want to fight anymore. I just wanted to breathe. At first, I thought Jason was only describing fencing, but as he spoke, I realized he was really describing his father's expectations, the pressure of never being allowed to fail, and the pain of constantly being pushed further than he could handle. My heart broke for him. I knew too well what it felt like to live under relentless pressure. I leaned forward gently. "Jason, you're not weak. Wanting to stop doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. No one should push you beyond your limits without your consent. Not even family." Jason stared at the sword in his hand. For a moment, I worried he might lash out, not at me, but at himself. I spoke softly, guiding him back into calmness, reminding him that he wasn't trapped, that his worth wasn't tied to a wooden blade or his father's expectations. Over the next weeks, Jason came back every day. Sometimes, he brought the fencing sword, holding it like a symbol of the pressure he carried. Other times, he came empty-handed, and those were the days when I saw him begin to heal. We started small exercises. I encouraged him to write letters to his father, not to send, but to express his anger, his sadness, and his longing for freedom. Jason poured his heart into those pages. Each word was like pulling the sword out of his chest, piece by piece. One afternoon, Jason walked in smiling for the first time. He placed the practice sword on my desk and said, "I don't need this anymore." That moment, I realized he had taken the first step toward reclaiming his life. But the story didn't end there. His father eventually came to the school after hearing Jason had quit the fencing team. Their confrontation in my office was tense, filled with raised voices and heavy silence. Yet, in that difficult hour, Jason found the courage to speak. He stood up to his father, explaining that he couldn't keep carrying the weight of someone else's dreams. His father's face shifted from anger to confusion, and finally to a reluctant kind of respect. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Months later, Jason joined the school's art club instead of fencing. He started painting swords on canvases instead of wielding them in combat. His weapon was no longer wood and steel, but brushes and colors. He was still fighting, but this time, it was for his own identity, his own peace. Looking back, I realized that the day he said, "I told him to stop, but he kept pushing the weapon deeper," wasn't about violence at all. It was about resistance and growth. It was about finding the courage to say no, and learning that strength isn't measured by how deep you push, but by how firmly you stand your ground. Jason's story taught me something too. We all carry weapons in life, expectations, pressures, fears. Some are handed to us by family, some by society, and some we forge ourselves. But in the end, We choose whether to let them control us or to set them down and walk a new path. For Jason, the path forward was painted in bright colors. For me, it was the reminder that even when people feel trapped, there's always a way to pull free. And that wooden sword, it still sits in my office today, not as a weapon, but as a reminder that sometimes the heaviest battles are the invisible ones inside us.